Love Bite Classic where there's that.
Yeah. Should we take a?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's take a little break. So break it in.
I guess one of the big points that I, would hope listeners can take away from this is the role of personal frequency and the power of our own minds, which most people are completely unaware of. This is something we were talking about on our break, which is how we're not exactly given an instruction manual when we incarnate here. So we don't even fully understand who we are and what we're capable of, let alone what this place really is and how it operates and what's really going on here. But that is one of the big things, is the power of our own mind and the role of our own personal frequency in terms of shaping our realities. And these things that are being used against us to not only hijack our own individual lives, but also the collective timeline. So when I'm talking about the role of personal frequency, it's kind of like what I was mentioning earlier in terms of realm breaching and how these things don't go from just zero to all out madness overnight. It starts small. They do something, a couple things here and a couple things there, and our negative reactions to it, and not trying to shut it down, and knowing our own power and pushing back against it, because we, again, we don't even know these things. We have to figure it out the hard way, usually from trial and error, but we don't even know. And then we allow it to just keep doing stuff to us and having a fearful reaction. It gives it permission, allows it to just keep happening. And then that's how it gains a foothold. And next thing you know, that's where things are just going out of control in our lives in terms of the woo-woo, as I like to call it. And people's lives start to get derailed. And that's how this interference can happen on an individual level, with people being targeted in that kind of way. So, there is such thing as we have the ability for manifestation and reality creation, which again, people don't realize a lot of the times. And once this thing kind of gains a foothold into our reality, we start to give it more power than it really deserves. And we're putting all our focus on it. And that kind of ties into a point that Bernhard had mentioned in terms of the thought loops that we ourselves can start to create, like almost like they're like entities in a way that are kind of it's like.
Well, see, what generally tends to happen is that emotional energy that you project and that you hold in your subconscious, it ends up having this reality creation effect. So your own mind and the own energies that you project outward start influencing the probability of your experiences. So in a sense, it's almost like you have a role as a broadcaster of the life experiences that come to you to some degree. I mean, it's not like 100% of everything that you experience is solely generated by you. I'm just saying that it can be, magnetically influenced in a way, I guess you could say, through the whole law of attraction and all that. But the dark side of the law of attraction is that if your subconscious can be polluted with negative programming or paranoid thought loops, for example, then, or if these entities can build up a sufficient level of interface with your thoughts and your emotions and your body, then they can start broadcasting into your reality through your own thoughts and your own emotions and energies. And how that actually ends up working in real life, for example, would be with some of these cases of targeted individuals where they have a very strong paranoid emotional energy that they're emitting, in addition to having, repetitive obsessive thought loops, concerning, being victimized, and that, every single little thing that happens is part of the whole control system trying to bring them down. But they're actually affecting the probability of what happens to them in life. They actually start creating a lot of these weird events. And then the more they do this, the more weird and improbable these events become, until it's no longer just, let's say, I don't know, like a neighbor coughing at an inopportune time to, somehow mimic you, like confirm some thought in your, these weird type paranoid thoughts that they have.
Yeah.
It goes from that little tiny bit level to something that's extremely weird, like entities coming through their walls and knocking on ceilings. And I mean, I hear lots of stories about people like hearing like basically aliens or some sort of entities like running on their roof, knocking sounds or coming through the walls or torturing them all night long. They use that word torture a lot. Mm-hmm. Poking them, electrical sensations, and all the way down to astral rape scenarios and so on, which is quite common actually. And all that stuff there, it tends to be, like Carissa said, it doesn't just happen overnight.
Yeah.
It's a build-up process through a gradual reinvestment of the energy that you project, which feeds them, which makes them stronger, which gives them a stronger foothold in your reality. They then in turn can do more things to you. And if you choose at some level to and keep engaging in it, then they become stronger, you become more fearful, they become stronger, you become more fearful. And by the end, a lot of these people, they have psychotic breaks, they end up in mental institutions, homeless, their lives destroyed because they've suspected everyone that could possibly help them as being a hybrid or as being one of the...
Everybody's in on it, I mean,
Yeah, so it ends up mimicking paranoid schizophrenia even if the person doesn't have a family history of
Right.
schizophrenia.
They're not actually schizophrenic, but they start mimicking it. I've seen that a lot with people who've emailed me. And one of the things that I had happen years ago, like this stuff was happening, and this is what I talk about in part 2 of my book. I call it the sidetrack circus diversion, fear and paranoia generators. And so this stuff starts happening, it's getting worse and worse and worse. My response to it back then, I wasn't like terrorized by it and I wasn't victimized. It was kind of along the lines of what James described earlier of that friend and what he was describing of her non-reaction to those men in black not showing up on the digital image. I was kind of always just like, there was some fear, but it overall was kind of nonchalant. And I was just mainly coasting in neutral. So I wasn't super scared and worked up, but there was a little bit of fear and just a whole lot of non-action. And I've described on my website, I think that kind of lack of fear and non-action kind of really did help to keep things from escalating more rapidly than they did, and it kind of did help to keep things at bay. However, because I wasn't doing anything to try to stop it, that's why it did keep invading my reality. And not until I gained awareness of the fear frequency, and I was literally told, it was brought to my attention, and I talk about this in my Higher Self article, that there really was a man behind the curtain, so to speak, that was causing all this stuff in my reality to try to keep me scared all the time. That was the quote. And once I learned that it just it lost all its power. It just overnight, it just evaporated. I could just no longer feel scared about it or have any kind of reaction, and it just completely blew it off, like, oh, get out of here. I mean, seriously. And then I could actually start to take active measures to push back at it instead of just being inert and not doing anything. And that's when it basically kind of stopped. So what was going on in my life back in 2002 and 3 and into early 2004 is no longer overtly happening in my reality right now. All of that stuff is gone, from black helicopters literally hovering on top of my apartment, the phones being tapped, stuff having come into my apartment while I was at work and messing with things so I would know that stuff was there. All of that stuff just stopped. And, there's because I had nothing to work with anymore. I lost all the fear and then actively started kind of rising up and knowing my own power and pushing back against it. So it stopped. I had to move on to somebody else. But, unfortunately, most people don't know this. That's what I was trying to say earlier. We're not given an instruction manual. People come here, they don't even realize, they don't understand how things work, what the rules are, what the power of their own mind is capable of. And, how much we're reality creating here. Everything from mundane, stupid stuff onto the big stuff. And then how the entire human species as a collective, we're reality creating for the entire planet. And that's how it's also interfering on the macrocosm level with the whole world. And some of the things that it's utilizing for that is the mass media and the entertainment industry and all the ways that they're kind of hijacking our minds to get in and start reality creating something that's in their best interest, which is affecting the entire timeline.
So they're just polluting our minds and our belief systems with false thoughts, false ideals, in order to create basically a false future that's not part of our destiny. That seems to be what they're going for. It's because it seems that we, for the most part, are we are the pivot points on the timeline. Okay, so if they want to change the timeline, they have to go through us without us necessarily knowing it. At a superficial conscious level,
because they actually don't have as much power as they would like you to think. So I mean, we're like, I think Laura mentioned this earlier, like we actually have the power, and they need that, so they have to kind of work through us. I mean, they're very limited in what they can actually do.
Yeah, it's because we are here in physicality in this timeline. We are the ones that have the final say in a way. And that's why they resort to all these subtle, cunning, behind using little backdoor exploits in order to affect these changes. It's because it's almost like they're behind a glass window and they can only tap, So how much can a person influence? That's that sort of thing. So that's why they work through our subconscious, through these subtle manipulation tactics. And that's why they look for these organic portals or these empty humans who don't have a spirit within them or enough of a spirit to resist, to kind of shut that out. So if you imagine, like in chemistry labs, they got these glass chambers with gloves built into the walls, and a person can stick their hand through the gloves and interact with whatever's inside. Well, in a way, those gloves are these empty people. And we are here inside this chamber, and these entities are outside of it, trying to influence what happens here. And, the problem is the more we, as a collective, align with them, allow them into our minds and into our lives, the more these two realities begin to merge. So the more tangible they become, and the lower in vibration we become like them, you see. And I think that seems to be the ultimate point, which kind of goes back to the whole hybrid breeding program, altering our genetics, combining that with what Bernhard said about the disembodiment, the split between the mind and the body, so that we kind of check out, something else can come in. And it's essentially an invasion of one reality into another, okay, or one reality by another. That seems to be what's going on. So, yeah, it's a pretty serious thing, but it all hinges on what your own free will reactions are to these manipulations.
Right. And if I was able to shut it down, like what was happening to me 10 years ago, it means I don't feel like it's just me and I'm somehow special. I really believe everybody has that ability. I mean, if anything's trying to invade your reality, you have the ability to shut it down. I mean, just say, sounds corny, just say no. But really, I mean, you exert your free will, which a lot of people don't do. So we have that ability. And if the whole collective could know to do that on a mass scale, I mean, and start resisting all the stuff that's being perpetrated upon us, could, ultimately affect the entire direction of the plan and the whole timeline itself. But that would require mass awakening.
Yeah, if you think about how these entities use feedback loops, where they induce a fear response in you and then you in turn feed them and they become stronger and so on. Well, you could turn that around and you could create a positive feedback loop where by your own free will, and actually what free will really boils down to, it boils down to acting in spite of current conditions rather than because of current conditions. Okay, so if you act because of the past, then you're just perpetuating the past and you're just repeating patterns, right? So that's basically what a computer or a machine does. It just takes inputs from the past and, progresses itself forward in time. And we don't want to be machines. We want to be humans with spirits, with living forces of free will. So what that requires then is choosing what you want for a future. Mm-hmm. Do you want to have a positive future? Do you want to grow as a spirit? Do you want to manifest? Do you want to realize your potential? And if yes, then you can't use current conditions and what these entities are doing as an excuse to stay stuck. Okay, and that's what a lot of these targeted individuals and the whole victim mindset, that seems to be what they're falling for, is saying, I have no power because this is happening. No, what you have to do is say, because this is happening, I'm going to put a stop to it. I want something different. So I'm going to create a new positive feedback loop where I'm going to take mental actions, physical actions, emotional actions, occult actions, which basically means just, things like canceling agreements, which is a whole subject in itself, in order to generate positive events, which then make you more positive, which then create more positive events. And that then, if you were to do it, on a wide enough scale, would spawn an entirely new positive future, which I guess might be the actual true future that we should be going into, right?
Yeah, and I also wanted to add this is kind of relating to the target individuals. I've heard of from many of them over the years via email. And the big thing that they all have in common is a hypersensitivity. They really, really care about, what everybody thinks and the fact that people are supposedly talking about them. And what I'm always advising people is you have to stop caring. Who gives a shit? If someone wants to talk about you, great, let them. Who cares what they're thinking? Who cares? I mean, you just have to stop caring. I mean, and that's another route in is that hypersensitivity, really, caring, and being self-conscious in that kind of way. And you just have to stop caring. And then, it loses its power. I mean,
well, yeah, you have to stop caring about the things that only have power because you care about them.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good way.
And that's huge because I think the people that are hypersensitive to that degree, it's based on their own conditioning
Mm-hmm.
of shame and guilt, abandonment, rejection.
Yes.
And really, if they stop long enough to think about why they're so hypersensitive to everybody else's response, basically it's a mirror of themselves for their own rejection of themselves.
Yeah.
And it also says they haven't done the work and they haven't taken responsibility and they're still putting the blame on everybody else. But I think one of the other aspects to this whole thing where we take back what is ours and that's the entire universe is that we have to be vocal about what we don't agree with, and we can't just be quiet, because mission is agreement. So your silence is a form of an acceptance to everything, and people have to start understanding and comprehending that they need to literally, just as much as we're a body here, but we're meta body. We're meta beings. So just as much as we're meta, we're body. That means that we have to actually use the body, aka be vocal and literally not agree with this whole thing, because the powers that are in operation on the physical here, let's just say the illuminated ones, okay? And I can't stand the word Illuminati because I don't think that's what they're called. But let's just say the illuminated ones, they're illuminated because they know that they can get the entire planet to do everything without having any guilt and any karma, because you know what? They haven't done it. Their hands are clean. They know the rules of the game. So they set up a war, but they won't go in the war, but they set it up so everybody else will fight it and they're scot-free. This is how they operate. This is how they've operated. So all they need is our silence, and all they need is for us to just accept what they give us, including that means music, media, that means what you read in the newspaper, that means you accepting normal day-to-day things. Like I challenge everything and everyone, bank, everything. And I make it vocal and I'm very verbal about not agreeing. And even since, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, but even the whole work schedule, your 5-day-a-week work schedule, like imprisoning slave work schedule, that's all a part of all this bullshit. And that you need a government? You don't need a government. You know what the government does? The government has taken away the power of the individual to help one another. Because our world, our true world is that we are helping one another, and we can govern ourselves together collectively for the better without a governing body. We are the governing body. So even on that basis, if they can get a person on welfare, if they can get a person on any kind of assistance, if they can get a person dependent, you know, even when you're employed, automatically you need to have a bank account, because if you want to get paid, that's the only way they'll pay you. So they just slot you in. If you don't stop agreeing, this is a part of it. This is how we take it back. And this is how we literally completely dismantle their reality.
That's a great point, and that also ties into what I wanted to say before in response to what Carissa said, and also Tom about free will and timeline shuffling and creation. Like, yes, we need to utilize our free will, but most people don't really have free will, but they're under the illusion that they have free will, because they are mechanical, reactionary responses based on their conditioning and programming. And also the way this matrix works and these entities in the hyperdimensional overlords, like you said, Laura, they need our free will consent, right? This is the trap of agreement, right? And it's also from from a humanity's food perspective and consciousness is food. It is more nutritious food if we act out of a free will to align with their agenda, right? And it's not like this evil agenda people think of Hitler or whatever. It's like, even what I see now, and people get very upset at me, government and politics. This whole hype here in California of Bernie Sanders, the savior image projected in all this worship and projections on this man, with this that creates all food and creates that, that manipulated free will choice to align with their agenda. Even from a basic 3D perspective, Bernie Sanders' socialist agenda ties in perfectly with the New World Order agenda. It's like the perfect prime setup. And like you said, government on the basic level is an iconic creation. People don't even question on the basic level the need for government. We've been living under these systems for so long that, people feel like somebody needs to be in control. There needs to be law and order. Everything falls apart, which just shows how people are removed from their own inner guidance, from their own divinity, from spirit, from nature, and project the need towards authority outside themselves. That shows you how we are very far away from a collective shift of consciousness. And the cognitive dissonance, and people, he's going to change the system from within. Same thing people said about Obama. But it is it needs to happen out. You cannot solve a problem on the level it was created, but very simply, it's about transcending it, right? Creating a different timeline and not feeding into that manipulated free will choices. So in order to use free will, we have to make conscious choices, and that ties into the whole sincere self-work part of, you cannot wake up without disillusionment. It's painful, it's struggle, it's painful for a lot of people, it doesn't happen overnight. You have to confront a lot. It opens up a can of worms. And even the self-work, it's you can read books about it, you can read quotes and all of it, but the work itself, as Goethe said, entails conscious suffering, and it can be messy and painful and all this shit to fully own, take responsibility for, and really feel and not escape, detach into the body, into the head, or blame outwardly other people or situation. But this is the shadow work, right? Which it comes down to the hero going into the underworld and saving the princess, which is his own feminine being, and the alchemical marriage of the inner male and female, right? And that ties into the embodiment. And there's a lot of conception about the word embodiment. People think, it's just being in your body, as if every athlete is then embodied. It's no. They're in touch with their more physical abilities, but embodiment, the word itself, means actually literally in the body. It refers to spirit embodied. It's actually one of the synonyms is incarnation or avatar, means spirit fully anchored in your body. And that's what it's about. That's just that how we protect ourselves and heal ourselves from. But what Carissa talked, I see is also a lot of people with these paranoia, emotional thought projections, and first of all, not really understanding that phenomena, because where there's fear, there's not understanding or lack of application of knowledge, right? Or lack of embodiment, and also lack of sincere self-work. I feel so many people jump into these fringe topics and get obsessed with them and want to addicted to experiences of what have you experienced and footage and this and that, and don't really understand, take it intellectually and don't understand what it really is all about and how you have to take responsibility in terms of your self-work. And it starts with basic psychological self-work. Like Laura said before, just basic learning how to make boundaries.
Yes.
Your basic emotional intelligence, to basic shadow work that, understanding when you get triggered and emotionally uprised, that's something for you to work on. Can start as simply as road rage. When you get upset, somebody cuts you and you cuss the person out on the road, which you would never say anything to that person in person. You create that luge that just these entities feed off of. So it starts on that most basic level, right? And most people avoid that, and then we have all, shadow is nothing negative. It's just that which is unconscious. There can be dark shadow aspects of the darker side of shadow of negative emotions, but also positive shadow projection, which also the entities feed off, which ties into worship of gurus, politicians, saviors, authoritarianism, all of that, where we give away our power. So it's really owning our power. And, like everybody else, and Carissa said before as well, we are way more powerful than these entities want to make us believe through their fear tactics, right? And fear in itself is actually also an illusion when you think about it. It's based on time. You're only afraid of what may happen in the present moment, what is there. If you own yourself, are grounded in the body, there's no fear. there may be danger, but you can still have, take responsibility of how you react if you can check the triggers and the reactive mechanical behaviors. So it really comes down on this most basic level. Like I think Evie said that before, sometimes the solutions are much simpler than we make them to be, right? Like a lot of people get into intellectual research, and it's important to understand that on that level, especially the bigger picture, but you cannot apply knowledge if it's not embodied and you live it. And that's what it comes down to on the basic level on taking responsibility without blame. And, this, what Carissa talked about, and you and Laura, about the sensitive people being very worried what others think, and like, all this stuff. I can actually relate to that, especially what Laura said. It's based on shame and guilt programming, and it took me long to work through this, but it also relates to one's self-importance and really not care, that nobody can take anything away from you, and it, and you can gauge your level of embodiment and way of progressing self-work by the way you get triggered in daily life, by the way you take other people's opinion about yourself important, and how you give away your power and your energy by whatever other person thinks of you or is doing to you. And if you're still engaged in blame or make things interpersonal, you still have work to do. It's that simple on that basic level, even like, yes, you can talk about entities interfering, and they feed off into that. They inject into these issues and wounds. But, that brings into another issue, which a lot of people contact me, ask me for entity removal, if I know somebody can remove entities, And yes, some people I've done exorcism on myself simply by starving them, by making my boundaries, by saying, no, I don't agree, my body, my game, my rules, stay the fuck off. Basically, I cuss them out, So it helps.
I like that. Yeah, it is a boundary thing. I mean, boundaries is something that many people haven't learned who've been through abuse or abduction histories or MK Ultra. They really don't know because they've been invaded all their lives, so that they tend to allow more invasions or normalize dysfunctional behavior and boundary invasions, or they invade others. So it kind of gets to the point I wanted to make about, because some people have been raised in certain environments where certain dysfunctional behaviors are normalized, or the moral compass has been moved from, let's say, ethical to unethical, because they were raised and conditioned that way. And I think our society is being conditioned to move our moral compass from something that is from good and ethical to something that is like any way goes, but it's actually unethical. And it's pulling us away from our spirituality and our ability to discern and our own power. So one of the things that I found was, a lot of people weren't getting things. I think people who've been through severe abuse for a long period of time, even though they think they're operating, with ethics or whatever it is, but they really don't know. There's these blind spots that just dominate their lives. And so they don't really know what it means to have, let's say, learn how to communicate effectively with compassion or assertiveness, and taking responsibility for yourself, and knowing when you're projecting and when you're not projecting, and knowing what is a safe relationship versus an unsafe relationship. What does that look like, and what are you doing in your relationships that's safe and maybe not safe? And so a lot of people, they don't know this. People don't grow up knowing this. So it's something that has to be learned by a lot of people. If you really care and you really want to take back your own power, you have to relearn and recondition yourself to acting in different ways and actually not selling yourself out. And that's some of the ways that we become invaded, is that we sell out, maybe in a relationship or a work environment or something, that we just, because we need this or that, or we'll let them do what they're doing. And then pretty soon our whole life is infected.
I just wanted to inject something real quick, even on the topic of relationships, especially this day and age. I see a lot of relationships breaking up and going through transformations. And usually what happens as well sometimes, beyond the love bite, dark side of Cupid relationships, but that one person wakes up and starts to question and kind of like does the work, but the partner doesn't wake up. And then there's like needing, forceful trying to wake the other person up, and it's an infringement of free will and like the wishful thinking and just, still trying to make it work. But then it's like, no, it's a diversion of paths. You cannot, and then especially what I also know, anybody who's really not engaged in that sincere self-work, and not aware of the hyperdimensional matrix in your close proximity, especially in a relationship, they become a Trojan horse for these entities to work through, like a portal. So you're just in proximity, right? That's exactly comes down to really discernment of who we really engage in, especially on an intimate level, because the relationships takes on a whole new level for, if you start to quote unquote wake up to this reality.
Yeah. So one of the things that I thought I'd share was, somebody had asked earlier, was like, what is ethical? What is integrity? People don't know what that is because there's so many things that are normalized in this society that we've been conditioned, not only in the Western world, but I think America in particular. And it's something that kind of dawned upon me that a lot of our history has been taken away from us through manipulation, and sometimes even time travel technology and interferences on these kinds of levels. But in the United States, a lot of our own sense of where our roots are spiritually and with respect to our group soul kind of thing, that history is actually being erased over time. And then it's being filled up with a lot of falsehoods and lack of morality, for lack of a better term. Although I think that they've done this through manipulating religion to be something that's so offensive and religiosity programming or judgmental that people just completely turn away from religion because it's done its shame and guilt programming. But then they've turned away from some of the ethical aspects of, just basic goodness and good character and good deeds and some of the more basic things that if we live by these golden rules, which is really our true spiritual essence, we tend to not have as much problems. Sometimes we're still targeted because we want to vibrate this frequency, but you really do have more power when you stay firmly attached to a more ethical approach. So one of the things that I wanted to share was just some really simple basics of, I had a book based on safe relationships. It was actually Christian based, but it doesn't have to be Christian based in order to be ethical. So what I found was useful was basically bullet points of what is unsafe behaviors versus what is safe and good behaviors. And it's amazing that people don't even know what that is. Or they, what I find too is that people don't know what a boundary invasion is, and they don't really understand about boundaries. They hear the word, but they really don't know about it because they've never, been conditioned differently. So anyway, I'll just read the safe versus unsafe since I felt that was a useful thing to know. I'll start with the unsafe and then work on with the safe behaviors. Okay, unsafe people are religious instead of spiritual. They are defensive instead of open to feedback. They are self-righteous instead of humble. They only apologize instead of changing their behavior. They avoid working on their problems instead of just dealing with them. Unsafe people demand trust, but instead of earning it. Unsafe people believe they are perfect instead of admitting their faults. They like to think and pretend they have it all together instead of just admitting their weaknesses. They blame others instead of taking personal responsibility. They lie instead of telling the truth. And along with that is a lot of the slander and gossip kind of things that go on. And stagnant instead of growing. And then unsafe people, actually, they have a negative and corrupting influence on us rather than a positive one. Unsafe people, they will gossip and they won't maintain confidentiality, and they'll do the kinds of things that we discussed, some of the borderline behaviors, where they try to get you to, be a close girlfriend or a close friend, and they buddy up and flatter you, and then they start negative talking about something. They get you to talk about your problems or get vulnerable, and they turn around and use that to completely slander you and talk shit about you. And then they do this without any remorse, like it's normal for them, They may lack true empathy. What defines bad from good is that bad is the unwillingness to admit wrongs, change behaviors, or a desire to do good for self and others, or even the desire to harm and get even instead of doing something more productive. So sometimes people don't even know the difference, okay? And then a safe relationship actually draws us closer to what I call organic source, goodness, heart, divine spirit. It draws us closer to others and helps us become more authentic and ethical. It means being able to be human with empathy for others while having the spiritual grace that can flow through the divine qualities of that higher self of humility and truth. And actually, that discernment comes with that, by the way. They could admit their weaknesses. They're spiritual instead of religious or acting on the programming aspect. They're open to feedback. They're humble. They change behaviors and can apologize and forgive. They're willing to do their healing work, dealing with problems. They take responsibility for their own issues. They can set boundaries with others who are not safe. That's really important. Instead of being a doormat and being really nice, they trust appropriately. They tell the truth instead of lying to others or themselves. They continue to grow in awareness and maturity and the willingness to do so. They can be in this world but not of it and still maintain warmth and connection. And they don't expect others to be perfect, yet they do maintain a discerning self-protection and healthy boundaries. And they can communicate effectively and know how to ask for what they want and need instead of manipulating others to get what they want. So I just wanted to point that out because a lot of people really don't know what that is.
I think that's a really good list. I do think that there's a new kind of predator that has been being created. And I hate to use the word created because I just, I think it's been a project in the making for many generations to create the perfect fractured host who embodies a lot of the positive traits. Okay, this is like a whole new level of the dark side of Cupid because they are, I've studied this just the movements and what's being created in there, like attempts to fracture and use these personality disorders and the influx of these narcissists that have happened. Now it seems like there's more than ever. But there is a new predator that is actually incredible, and they are really getting in certain key spots in the world, and they're targeting a lot of the spiritual culture, key people, but these people have the ability to mask themselves so much to make it look like they've got all the positive qualities that you can't tell it's negative until you're very, very deep in it. And that's sort of a different layer of it. Maybe we can go into that more next time.
Yeah, it's kind of like the guru, the hosted guru that's hosted by a really high level. I don't know if it's it's more than a reptilian, obviously. It's something much more higher on the realm hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because when you do get close, and that's when you get bitten, but by all outward appearances, they can give you bliss, they can do all kinds of things that only the inside people know. And a lot of times they kill them off before they can tell their story.
Exactly. Yeah. Real destruction.
Wow.
Yeah, that will be food for
next time.
Hoping James could add to what you just finished talking about, Evie, in discussing the traits of what's healthy versus non. And
yeah, I'd like to comment on that. It goes back to the seeking the approval of others syndrome, which itself is a manifestation of shame-based upbringing, emotional, physical trauma, whatever the case may be, to the point where the individual is in such people-pleasing, seeking approval mode that they really open themselves up to a lot of manipulation, mind influence, abuse even, because as has been pointed out, they can't set proper boundaries. And so they lose right for the plucking from really narcissistic people. And so like I've seen examples, the Matrix will insert someone into someone's life. And I'm thinking in particular of a gal who was literally a walking, talking, negative, organic portal. All of 20 years, came from a reptilian bloodline family. And I know someone that was a housemate with this hosty person. And the moment this person would walk into the house, there would be an energetic shift. Everything would change. The atmosphere, everything would change, because in the spirit world, as you know, thoughts are things. They're real things. This is why the archontic forces like to mess with our neural genetics and through other forms of manipulation. So we wind up a lot of times with these OCD thought loops and thoughts of despair and what. And what comes out of this girl, who was only about 20 years old, is nothing but negative. She'll walk into a room and talking negatively about people that you don't even know or don't even care about. And it's never a question of, oh, this person that you don't know, they just... So it's not even a good thing. It's like, okay, well, I don't know who she's talking about, but at least that person got a puppy, so that's a good thing. It's like she comes in or into the house and just intrudes upon everyone else in that social dynamic and just starts heaping all this abuse and that we don't know, never heard of, don't care about. And what that person has become like a negative energy portal. And having that person as a housemate, it takes the hyperdimensional influence and interference to another level, because whatever are working through that person have now gotten free reign through some kind of tacit agreement of approval to kind of mete out like manipulation, vengeance, interference to anyone else who happens to be in the house. Now, what the person I know did that was in that household dynamic, what she did was she simply disengaged. It was like, no, I'm not going to engage with that person. I have enough self-worth where I'm sitting out on the back patio enjoying the day and watching the birds. I'm not going to sit there any longer and listen to this person talk negative about her negative drama-filled life and about all the negative people in her life that are making her miserable. And of course, she's got to turn around and spread all that negativity on the other person. Treating basically everybody as a negative emotions dumpster is what it amounts to. The things in the spirit world, right? So what my friend did was simply disengage, just like, told her verbally, told her even in a text message, phone to another in the same household. I need space, I need distance, I got too much going on in my life, I don't need that, right? And this 20-year-old girl was a walking train wreck. She fell asleep coming home in a car, crashed into a neighbor's fence. She would bring in weird strangers into the house and just get into arguments with them. And it was a big negative archontic scene. But what it comes down to, we have myriad choices that we either take or we choose not to take. And not making a choice, not making a decision, as it turned out, is the same as making a decision to allow everything.
I was going to say, tying into what we were talking about earlier in terms of the whole shame-based, I think that was a great way of putting it, Bernard, when you say the shame-based core. Growing up, that's exactly what my upbringing was. It was just constantly being yelled at and screamed at, verbally abused and shamed. Take mountains out of molehills. The littlest thing I would do, it was like it was the worst thing that anyone on the planet had ever done. And that's how my parents reacted to everything. And on top of the extreme level of bullying that was going on outside the home. So all of these things, it was like, looking back in retrospect, you could clearly see that something was really trying so hard, like targeting to get me to just curl into a little ball and just disappear off the timeline. And instead what ended up happening was by the time I was 17, it was like I snapped, and it's like I just stopped giving a flying fuck about anything anymore. It was so over the top for so many years that instead of finally destroying me, I just went the other way. And
that's key, because well-integrated people or at least people that have done a lot of their self-work, adversity makes them. I've known some couples that are very awake, very aware of the hyperdimensional interference, and try as they might, these negative forces try to drive them apart, try to create physical, emotional, indeed spiritual duress between the couple, within each individual in the couple. But a really switched on a couple that has an organic form of love, that will make, it will compel them to seek comfort and safety with each other. So sometimes that backfires, but that's a very good point you made. It's how the myriad little and not so little decisions we make. Like, for example, very 3D example, Monsanto shares of stock are taking a nosedive. McDonald's shares of stock are making a nosedive because countless people have made a decision not going there. I'm not going to bring my family there to eat their toxic slop. And the same thing at the supermarket. A lot more and more people are making a choice to eat a healthy food way, going to places where they get their food. They're going directly to farmers markets, cutting out these corporate, and that's key. And so it comes down to like this, divesting ourselves of this need to seek the approval of others, divesting ourselves of the need to please, be a people pleaser, because that opens us up to all kinds of abuse and all kinds of to the point where we put their feelings and their sensitivity and their emotions before. And the irony is, often as not, as we all know, these narcissistic sociopathic bores have no empathy. They don't have any real emotions. Relations, the entities and forces working through them are using them as a medium with which to affect our 3D world, and us in particular. So when we give credit, I don't want to hurt this person's feelings, they really mean well. When they're just like a walking, talking train wreck in so many ways, we those of disservice. So when we get to that place in our heart where we can say, no, I'm disengaging, I'm detaching, I'm not going to be a part of this, I'm not letting that person in my life anymore, that's when we really begin to grow, we really begin to change. And that's another one of the
Well, while he's gone, just reminded me something when he talked about not supporting Monsanto, McDonald's, and talking back to the government topic and voting. You know, when you vote, that's on a metaphysical level an agree to be ruled over. It's a trap of agreement. Very basic, right?
Yeah, plus you're saying you're aligning yourself with the person you're voting for, and nobody's perfect, and a lot of these politicians have engaged in God knows what, and like, you know, like you vote for a candidate who, you know, they were a senator who voted to go to war, like with Iraq, Afghanistan, and now they're running for president. You vote for them. It's like you're saying you support all of these things that they've, you know what I'm saying? I wrote about that on my website, actually, like a little blurb about that, about voting and what does that imply on a metaphysical level.
Yeah.
Yes. And Bernard made the point earlier. Bernard made the point earlier about the Bernie Sanders cult of personality. I'm watching this video, and it really shows these people embedded in the matrix, where these, I guess you would call them liberals, socialist collectivists, screaming and hurling and these are just kids. These are like 19, 20-year-old males screaming all this vulgar abuse at Donald Trump supporters. Now, both people, clearly the people like us, they're embedded in the matrix. It's the false left-right syndrome going on. But especially the socialist collectivist mindset that's been imbued in multiple generations by now. And to watch them just hurl other people that are stuck in the same matrix as them, that's a classic example of people who have allowed themselves to be plugged into this consciousness, where they've divested any responsibility for self-learning, for self-growth, for self-healing, and people allow themselves to be utilized in this fashion, where they become matrix sentinels. Oh, what do you mean you're not getting your child vaccinated? That your child's going to be everyone else's child. They allow themselves to be matrix sentinels. We see this all across the board. So when we get to that point where we're not going to worry about what we think, we're going to do things that are based on our own self-interest, that's when we really begin to make changes in our life. And then we begin to remove these archontic people, all these matrix sentinels in our life, whether it's in the form of people, institutions, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a big part of the healing process, but that we have to be part of a herd. And the manipulation within us and the self-worth issues we have, we're manipulated into not being comfortable in our own. We're manipulated into not being content in our own solitude. We have to be around other people. We have to go along with what no, we don't agree with it. Just we go along to get along. We lose ourselves in the process. So when we get to that baseline level of not giving a rip, that's when a lot of healing, a lot of growth, a lot of changes begin to take place.
Yeah, that's even that group pressure and group psychology. That's a topic on its own on a macro level with nations and political affiliations to spiritual groups and anything in between.
And I do think we need to put in our mindset globally that we do not choose door number 1 or 2. Okay, it's not about voting this person or that. It's just maybe you shouldn't be voting, because that's like accepting a government body taking over your life, and their agreements become yours.
Yeah,
so
well, that's part of the game as well.
And half the time, these politicians aren't even that smart. I think, people just make them, they project onto them what they want to see.
They're not environmentalists. Again, just take out the government body, period. It's like, take out everything. Choose door number 3. Fuck it all. Make our own choices. I don't want their door number. They want me to believe that there are only 2 doors to choose from. They want me to believe I can only choose 1 or 2. And they hope that little mind control trick they're doing on me is going to make me go, oh, that's the only choice I have in this reality. Well, you know what? Hey, I have door number 3. It's my door.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about anyone else, but I'm getting tired of every time there's an election, it's Clinton and Bush and these two.
I know.
No way. It's like, when are we going to have a reality where we don't have a Clinton?
Carissa, I think we talked about it last month when we had our little talk, like I see a lot of people, like maybe you also can relate to it. People are into my work, read my work, hyperdimensional matrix, all like into it and like talking about their attacks. I interact with them. And next thing I know, I see on Facebook, vote for Bernie Sanders. We need to get Bernie Sanders. I'm like, wow, and there's no judgment, like see what that, but it's like people, what the information they take in, what they could truly understand as opposed to what they think they know.
That's the polarity. That's the other thing I want to say, is everything here is rigging everybody on either a positive or a negative polarity. Neither are right. That's all a part of the game. It's controlled opposition.
Yeah.
This whole game set up, this chessboard, is all a series of controlled opposition on the one hand to neutralize you. If you choose this or this, you're already in the polarity. You're neutralized.
That kind of goes into the whole
harvest.
Yeah, it is a harvest. It's forced choices through manipulation to think you have to make this choice or that choice, and then they've hijacked you. You have to make your own choices and stop being manipulated by their manipulation of reality. That those are the only choices.
And the thing about it, I just want to make a quick point, is that these matrix sentinels take on many forms. They could be loved ones, they could be relatives, they could be neighbors, but everything that comes out of them, a lot of these people, is a soundbite. It's something they've heard from someone else. It's something they've heard from TV. They've heard from a bought and paid quackademic. So they literally don't have anything to say meaningfully. Everything they say, everything they think they know came from something else, a tainted source. So again, it's that water off a duck's back kind of thing. When you listen to these people, when you look in the, and you should be able to make a quick judgment. This person is beyond reach. I'm not going to spin my wheels and undo a lifetime of programming. Short conversation. Like, I'm bypassing these enemy strong points. I wish them the best. I wish them well on their journey. I hope they find what they're seeking for. To me, they're an enemy strong point from the standpoint that if I knuckled under, if I had a moment of weakness and I allowed them just for that one moment, okay, you're right, I'm sniffling, I'll get a flu vaccine, right? If I let them have an inroad, because it's the matrix working through that in the form of a matrix sentinel, but I'm aware of that dynamic. I don't judge them. I don't hate on them. I don't look down upon them. I know that each one of us is on our own journey, and some people, quite frankly, need a swift kick in the butt. That the only way their paradigm will change is if something really drastic happens to them. Then they still may not wake up. They still may believe the emergency broadcast and whatever that's being spewed out to them in the case of another big event happening. Events. So I don't judge them. I recognize them for what they are.
Yeah, I mean, what I've described is that, you can, plant your seeds where appropriate. Like, if somebody at your work, says something that reveals that they have some kind of minor level of awareness.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Drop a seed, and if they want to bite, they will, or throw a line, that's the other analogy. But don't try to forcibly go around waking people up, and
yes.
Don't waste your time on
that's matrix-ridden behavior. It is. You're absolutely right, because that is in itself matrix. Is this compulsion, the self-righteous need to educate everybody and to force feed them into believing what you believe. It's not right, and it's mindless expenditure of mental energy.
Right, and like you said, most people, it's like a lifetime of programming, and you're not going to undo that in a 10-minute thing where you're trying to impose yourself on them. It's like,
That's right.
It kind of goes along the same thing with people want to have their entities removed, or you clear me of implants, and what you see is like years and years of programming and behaviors and lack of self-knowledge that they need to work on themselves before they can have somebody else do it for them. And it's hard to
what I said before, in anti-movement, people want to feel they want to have entities removed and feel that's it, that's all what's needed. But, I've worked with other healers who have helped me with entity detachment, so to speak. Like, there's an open wound. It's like surgery. Like, then they come back tenfold. So you need to take care of yourself and work on your shit. It becomes even more serious afterwards. It's not like you remove an entity and you're done and fine.
And I think we're facilitators for them to do it for themselves. And I think that's the key. Because they're looking for the answer, a savior outside of themselves.
Right.
And I think that we have to distinguish between the difference that no, it doesn't work like that. We are literally facilitators, will help you excavate your own hidden shadows so that you do the work in your own.
Very good point.
Your own savior.
Yes.
Yes. Because they have to work
from all.
They have to work past Exactly. They have to work past this notion that they're worthless, that they're powerless, that they're and they can't do anything about their circumstances. This is what causes them to act out in different ways and seek bad association, indulge in substance abuse behaviors, because they're trying to fill the void when they should be, like Bernard says, embodied, be comfortable in their own skin, and love themselves in a narcissistic way, but they still have that survival instinct. So many people are lacking that survival instinct. Now, as we have the ouch factor. Ouch! You're crowding me. You hurt my feelings emotionally and physically. Back off, clown. We've got the ouch. We've got the survival instinct. Too many people are lacking that, and unfortunately now we're seeing generations of people are bringing up their children to just be basically pawns and basically be guinea pigs for this wretched system. Just letting this quantic system do whatever they want, shame them into allowing them to use their children as guinea pigs. It's very pervasive. So once we get to that point also where our survival instincts are honed, then we can also really make some inroads into healing and growing.
You know what I wanted to address real quick, what just came to mind in terms of healing. Maybe some of you guys can share your experiences, because we talk so much about the hyperdimensional matrix control system, the negative entities, and all the manipulation. But there are positive forces in the non-physical realm as well, right? Of course, the New Age has distorted it all, as we know of contactees and turning abduction to experiences in something positive, which was never positive, or the aliens are here to save us, and that kind of nonsense, right? Because first of all, higher positive forces who truly on a higher positive level of consciousness know that we need to do the work on our own. We need to learn our own lessons for our soul evolution and soul integration and embodiment. They're not going to save us. They're not going to pull us out of the mess. We need to learn to become our own leaders. And they would also never respond to worship or projection of authority onto them. Only negative entities would, which then pose as positive ones, right? Very important to keep in mind, especially in the New Age, right? And then also there's guidance. I see but the guidance come if I see, the biblically saying, ask and knock and you shall receive, which is, not the whole oversimplification of asking you shall receive in terms of material stuff of reality creation. But the more effort you show out of from your own being, like Gurdjieff said, paying with yourself, the more the universe and spirit will respond and help you on your way and guide you with more positive synchronicities, more like, the right book, teaching, or person, situation will appear in your life to help you along, right? Not to save you, but to help you learn your lessons, so to speak. And the more we then do our own work, the more we're being guided in these ways. And that's, I feel, how positive forces, support us. I've experienced that tremendously when I was doing this workshop at the retreat of my friend in the Peruvian jungle last week. We were there for 9 days, and we did amazing healing work. But we never called in any entities or spirit guides. I knew the more I stay embodied in my own self, my spirit, boom, and do the work, I know we were supported. And I felt this tremendous, you may call it spirits from the jungle or other forces helping us, because we're just created that space, holding that space. But I never called anything in. It was just connecting to who I truly am within, that spirit within, right?
Exactly. And that's where it's at. The answer is with us, and the Savior is us.
I think it's also important, and this ties into what you're saying, Bernard, to elaborate a little bit maybe, and this is something Tom knows a lot about, but how, when you have negative forces trying to masquerade as something positive, tricking people and therefore getting into their reality where they can then derail them or do whatever it is that their little agenda is. I know Tom knows a lot about this because he's heard from a lot of people over the years telling him their stories of these types of entities that have tried to kind of reach out and make contact with them, which, first off, positive entities do not just come at you and just knock on your door necessarily, banging on your door basically, let me in. So that right there is a red flag sign of that you're dealing with something that doesn't have your best interest in mind. But did you want to elaborate, just because this is important, and because this is happening to a lot of people where they're in contact with entities that are trying to portray themselves as good, and they're not. And people, like Eve, your list of people don't even know how to recognize healthy relationships and behavior. They also don't know how to recognize tricksters and stuff that's masquerading as the good. And so they fall for a lot of stuff, and they let stuff into their reality, which gains a foothold.
Right. Yeah. People, the dark side has created false dichotomies, right, between actual negative boogeymen, or obviously negative, like demons inducing nightmares and creating depression and, addictions and stuff. But they also have created false good guys, which, come in the guise of, I know one lady who, she was being groomed and courted by what she perceived to be an Archangel Michael. Okay. And promising her that if she did what this entity said, basically that she would become his bride in heaven. So, a bit of occult astral bait to lead her along, but all of it was towards the goal of control over a free will entity to feed off that person's spirit and their energy and so on. So but the difference between these imposter positive entities and the genuine ones, obviously, like Carissa said, the imposter ones go out of their way to solicit you because they're salespeople, they're predators. right? The parasites. So they have to come after you, and they have to gain your cooperation and your free will.
Mm-hmm.
They have to gain your attention. And the true positive forces, from my experience, well, first of all, I want to say that if these positive forces didn't exist, then I don't think the negative forces would necessarily have to imitate anything. I think they're imitating in an effort to cover up and to take the place of, to hijack, okay? So anyway, back to the whole goal of the idea of positive entities. They're very hands-off, and they respect frankness. You know, they don't need you to engage in rituals, like Bernhard said, to pull them in, to invoke them, okay? They can see your heart, they can see your mind, they can see what your true motivations are, and when you ask, let's say out of boredom or narcissism or, you know, just plain curiosity because, I want to experience something weird, so hey, let's have it in, let's go talk to an angel. I mean, they know what's going on there. They're not going to be fooled by that. And if you do a ritual and you do pull something in, you can be pretty much guaranteed that it's not going to be the actual real thing. It's most likely going to be something imitating it, okay? So, yeah, so a good example of that would be, well, not to name any names, but certain groups that go out to try to contact UFOs and call them down. You know, they go through these meditation rituals and they invoke these UFO experiences, right? Thinking that now they're communing with these cosmic enlightened grays or whatever. But, you know, it's all a big charade because, you know, the couple times where I've sort of attempted that, yeah, I got some repercussions.
When you were young, it was like
it was just like years ago.
He was like little.
Yeah, like 27.
Can you talk about that, Tom? What happened to you?
Well, here, okay, I'll give two examples. Okay, one time it was on my birthday. I was 27, and I decided to go out for a walk. Now, at this point, I was in this really good mood. Okay, and 27, it's a multiple of 3. You know, 3 and 9, and 9 itself is a multiple of 3. And, you know, certain alien groups, they have this thing about the number 3 that's symbolic to them. You know, maybe some higher spiritual principle. And there's people like Gurdjieff and Maraviv and all these other people that talk about 3s and laws of 3 and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, long story short, I had this feeling in the back of my mind. It was a little very quiet question, which was, would you like us to, you know, do a little demonstration for you? Now, I didn't invoke anything. I just felt this in the back of my mind. And without even consciously realizing, I said, okay, well, it would be cool if I picked a constellation in the sky and you kind of flew over and shined a light at me, okay? So I walked up to the top of the hill and I was looking at the constellations, and sure enough, within about 10 seconds, this little bright starlight started moving in from over here, and when it got to that exact spot, it flared up almost like a lighthouse shining its light at you. And then it kind of went on and disappeared. So, but nothing bad came of that, okay? So that's one example. Another night, I willingly went out thinking, hey, maybe I can do it again. But at that point, I wasn't necessarily invited, okay? I was trying to do something strictly out of curiosity that really wasn't my place to do. And when I sort of intended for it again, that night I had a dream. And certain dreams, you can kind of tell that they're not just dreams because you can almost feel like you're like another intelligence there kind of broadcasting into your mind. Well, in that dream, I basically got a pretty loud warning by these entities saying, don't do that again. And what they're trying to say is it's almost like you're in a war zone. You just don't want to get in a radio and say, hey, anyone out there want to come to my place and hang out? You don't want to do that, right? Because you don't know what side is going to listen. And, you know, they're going to find your position and boom, you know,
you don't know what you're inviting in is basically what it is.
Yes.
A lot of these people messing around with invoking, so they don't even know what, you know, or given permission to be abducted. You have no idea what it is that's out there, and, you know, you just got to be very careful.
Yeah, because the very first time I made that mistake was when I was 12. I had looked out the window of my car, my mom's car, while we were driving down the highway at night. And back then I was reading a lot of books about grays and abductions, and I didn't know how bad the grays actually were, at least not intellectually. So I said, if you're out there, can you please give me a sign? And I was expecting the stars to fly around or something, but nothing happened. However, that night I had this dream of being on an airplane surrounded by these people with gray faces with black eyes, and I could feel the acceleration of taking off. And the next day I woke up with this scar on my forehead, you know, this 2-inch long hairline scar going right into my hairline. And I know it wasn't there before because, you know, so I got abducted, and I had some abduction issues in the years that followed because I had mentally pictured the grays and I had invited them in. Very bad. Don't ever do that. And there's books out there on Amazon right now saying 10 steps to inviting extraterrestrial contact with the grays. There's children's books saying how to, you know, the grades are good, buy them into your life. So that's some bad stuff going on out there.
Yeah.
And the whole point of this is just to say that there are positive forces, there are imposter forces, and they are kind of similar, but there's there's reasonable differences between them. Okay, like for example, on my birthday, when I got the little solicitation of mine, it wasn't like, would you let us in? Like a malevolent kind of thing. It's more like, we got this narrow window of opportunity. It's your birthday. Maybe I'll give you a little glimpse of something, right? Versus the other times, or some of the people that I've gotten emails from, where, for example, they had a dark shadow hovering over them while they were sleeping, and they heard a voice saying, "Would you let me in?" And they said yes. They said yes. And when the shadow went into them, within a couple of days, they started hearing voices and started getting hallucinations, like induced artificial telepathic dreams. And through these dream scenarios, they would have experiences all night long of, let's say, being on an alien ship or visiting other worlds, but they're actually in their bed being jacked into telepathically by this entity, who in some cases might not even be an alien. It might be, let's say, a demon or some psychic, discarnate human or something like that, projecting this BS into this person's brain in order to build up this false storyline to get that person under their control. Now, I want to make one brief point, which is some of these entities are strictly opportunists in the sense that they feed off a person. They just want to control them. Okay, big deal. They just do it for sport or for energy or for whatever. But then there's other entities like certain alien classes that are doing it more for a long-term strategy. And it's these ones that are doing it for the timeline manipulation purposes, let's say to suppress promising researchers or people watching who might be waking up, for example. So some entities are just in it for a quick feed. They might induce nightmares, might be succubi, incubus type beings. But then there's other ones who are very intelligent and they know you pretty well. They know your psychology, and they basically they go around controlling people, building disinformation vectors. Like a lot of these people you see online spouting some of the crazier stuff about, like, say, like Mars bases and some of the more ludicrous types of super soldier stuff, or really extreme end of the world doom type mindsets. A lot of them, I think, seem to have been groomed or molded by entities that came to them and started giving them false experiences. Okay, so we have to watch out for these possessed, shadowed people, I guess you could say, who do that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's absolutely a wonderful point you made, and I think people need to do assessments with, talking with the person's spirit, being clear about their healing work, and really being honest about discernment and ruling out MK Ultra, ruling out some of this other stuff by really doing the true therapeutic diagnostics instead of just selling the story or, getting these wonderful cases with all these wonderful aliens and not doing the diagnostic work. Because, God, there's a lot of trickery out there.
Yeah, I mean,
I think another thing.
Synchronistically, I'd gotten an email from a woman about a week or so ago, and she mentioned that voices that were kind of starting with the whole, like, let us in, let us in. And she was like, well, who are they? Like, who are these that want me to let them in? So basically I advised her on everything that we've been talking about here in terms of, obviously anything positive doesn't operate by trying to coerce you into letting them in. That's just, that right there is the giveaway. And also I explained about the realm breaching thing and gaining a foothold and the whole permissions thing. So I kind of educated her on all of that. So one of the interesting things was I felt this urge when communicating with her about, you need to shut this down. I felt like really intense. I need to tell her that, but also that you need to not give a shit. That was the specific phrase I felt compelled to tell her. You need to not give a shit, because she felt like earlier what we were talking about being self-conscious, like, I can hear them talking about me and stuff, and which sounds like she was schizophrenic, but she actually wasn't. You could tell by her email that she's not schizophrenic, very coherent. But has the stuff happening that makes it sound kind of schizophrenic. And one of those things was being aware that their, stuff is kind of monitoring her and can hear the voices and being, like, obviously showing that she's really caring about the fact that, stuff is watching her and talking about her. And that's why I felt compelled to tell her, you need to not give a shit. And funny enough, it turns out that when she had started to experiment with the idea of ignoring them, like, you know what, no, I'm not listening to you anymore, and I don't care what you're saying, go away. she clearly heard in her mind, one of the voices said, oh, she doesn't give a shit. And then that made her have the reverse psychology reaction of like, no, I do care. I do. And like kind of almost like chasing after them, like, no, come back. I do care. And see, I could kind of tell that. And it was funny that I was just really compelled to like, you need to not give a shit. You know? And then it turns out that they were using that tactic to try to get her to give a shit. So hopefully I got through to her and she's going to not, you know, she's going to get this stuff out of her reality. But God, who knows how many people this is happening to out there. I mean, that's just a couple of people I've ever heard from, and, you know, all the ones Tom's heard from, but what about all the ones we don't hear from? So people who might hopefully be watching this and they can benefit from.
Well,
and on the 3D realm too, also.
Forces that are enough. Sorry, I just wanted to say the benevolent family wants to see us grow up.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to enable us, and they're not going to invade our free will or our sovereignty. They want to see us empowered within ourselves, and so they're happy to just let us grow up and offer what they can without imposing anything.
And a lot of that involves, like, as much as they can get us to hopefully learn on our own instead of spoon feeding, which I think is something I mentioned earlier. Like, they don't just hand you all, as much as you can hopefully learn and figure out for yourself, because that always helps you grow. And so, yeah.
James, did you have?
Yeah, I just like to kind of wrap it up. On the 3D physical plane, it's also important that there's so many sources of information, as it were, on the internet these days. Again, it's a problem of being in one's headspace and being disembodied. Too many people listen to people on the internet, listen to lectures, listen to interviews. From an intellectual standpoint, what they should be doing is listening to what their body is telling them. I get a funny feeling in my heart center. Do I get a funny feeling in my solar plexus? Something about this person is saying all the right things. They look good. They smell good. They're saying but there's something that I intrinsically am having a problem with. People have to learn to pay attention to that. It goes back to the lack of self-worth, shame-based, need to seek the approval, need to be a people-pleaser syndrome. So when more people do that, and I'll say right that a lot of these gurus out there particularly target women who are on the path of healing, regeneration, and becoming a powerful spiritual warrior in their own right. There's a whole cottage industry that's sprung up of gurus that are targeting women in particular. They're going after the resurgence of the divine. They're trying to knock it back, but it's not working. So women in particular really need to go within and listen to what their body is telling them.
That's so true. I get so many emails from people where they're really good people. You can tell they actually are smart people, and they have a lot of awareness. And sometimes they articulate things way better than I even could. I mean, they should be writing articles seriously, but they're coming to me to run things by me because they don't trust their own gut. They don't trust and just like, well, why is this happening with so many people? They don't trust their own instincts about anything, and they want external validation from other people to tell them if something's okay or not okay, or if somebody is good news or bad news, and instead of listening to their own voice, their own intuition. So it's
that's right. They have to tune into the environment the way animals do. Animals don't say, am I being stalked? Was that a scent I picked up? No. If they sense a change in the atmosphere, the environment, they bolt. And so we need to get back to the baseline level of situational awareness and heightened awareness all around us.
No, that's very important what you guys said, especially also James, in trusting your bodily sensations, when you interact with a person, which is even harder on the internet, because I see a lot of people, cunning researchers have cunning intellects, and even writers who know how to write the perfect things, even big spiritual teachers, but when you meet them in person, something is very off, right? They can say and imitate the right things. They can be very eloquent, have the huge vocabulary, but it's not embodied. There's something missing.
That kind of goes along with the point of knowing how to discern and knowing, like, say, when there is a predator in our midst, and being able to trust those gut feelings instead of shutting them down. Now, I think self-doubt was one of the biggest issues I realized that I had, and if I didn't doubt myself so much, I wouldn't have gotten into as many situations like in my past. Mm-hmm. So listening to the gut and actually knowing also your blind spots. And that is actually where sharing can help. So sometimes we need each other to help each other know what our blind spots are, but learning how to trust that instinct.
We cannot always do the self-work on our own. That's true.
No.
And I don't believe in mistakes. So even when you're in something that is negative, I do believe it's there to teach you something so you could even get beyond. And those lessons are always more metaphysical. So they're actually blowing through a lot of the coffins and the attempted, how they bury our knowledge from within ourselves. And I find that these relationships we get into and experiences that are negative often are the reason why we break through so much.
Very true. I mean, we mentioned that, I think, on our Love by Plus panel last time, that even the word attack is not really good because it implies victimization. It's a huge initiation if you can read, and it's a teaching. You can apply these forces as teachers.
Exactly.
And there's some people that just do not want to hear that point of view, by the way. They get really angry when, I know that's somebody out there had a big problem with Eve, for instance, because you dare to imply that there should be some level of personal responsibility with people. And boy, it's just, I saw this in a comments thing on the internet, but I'm like, but she's right. That's a And there's people, they don't want to hear that. They want to be completely victimized. It's all on everything else. And they don't want to take any responsibility, and they don't want to learn and grow from it. Like what Laura was just describing. I mean, ideally, yes, it would be nice if we didn't have to go through negative stuff, but you know what? It happens. And if it happens, hopefully we can learn from it and we can grow, and you'll become a better person. And if
it's that response, Carissa, I find that these predators that feed on us, usually if their behavior is that they don't want to do the work, it's because they're becoming vampires, just like what's hosting them.
Yes.
So it's an interesting dynamic, the vampire and the vampire and the vampire.
And these are the people that are now reaching out to various researchers out there in the world. Like they just kind of work their way down the line from researcher to research, like emailing them and reaching out to them with their victimization story. And they have become energy vampires. So now they're becoming the very thing that they rant about, and they're imposing that behavior now onto other people.
Yeah. I think these people in this day and age, what is happening, they're going to disintegrate. It's in this, I feel when the time is about integration or disintegration. A lot of people, even in terms of timeline, I feel what we're experiencing more and more is a timeline reality split. Because I don't see any collective awakening anytime soon, right? There's 7 billion people on this planet with vast different levels of consciousness, from soulless people to more embodied, and vast different individual lessons. So, I think people who are more like aware and do their work, we also naturally, by law of attraction and frequency resonance vibration, attract each other, and we can hold this, and like you said, don't give a shit what other people think. They're going to be left alone. We cannot control, right? And eventually it will reveal to themselves, like whatever's going to happen to them.
And those two frequencies can't stay together. And the more that we're coming into our own integration, the more that they're coming into their disintegration, and those two just can't. It's a house divided cannot stand. So, essentially,
well, I got a boogie. I got to take care of stuff.
So on that note,
I'll catch up to all of you later.
Wrap it up a bit here, and awesome conversation. And just a final,
really good one.
We're going to do another panel probably on the whole reptilian possession aspect and all that. I figured that might be a good separate talk for next time. So
this recording.
It'll be a good one.
This was wonderful, and thank you everybody for being part of this. And
we'd like to wrap it up with what Carissa said, which is pretty much just say no.
Yeah.
I know. It works for me. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.
Right. Take care.